Can you see me? Welcome you to the first of our two Ministering During a Crisis panels. And I know that you're in for a treat. Part of the motivation behind this evening's program was we were thinking about the fact that the pandemic has hit all of us hard, whether it's financially, mentally, in terms of our family relationships. There are so many things that have happened in the past several months, and nobody has been harder hit than our ministers. So that could be our pastors, Bible workers, communicators, etc. And we don't know their stories in a lot of cases because pastors are not often given that platform, pastors and other ministers. So we wanted to open a space for them to share what the pandemic has been like for them, and also give us some tips as to how we can navigate the rest of the pandemic and post pandemic life as people who want to be ministers, because every member is meant to be a minister. So I'm sure that you'll be very blessed. And I want to also just let you know that the format for this panel is going to be a little bit different than you might be used to. So we have our 6 people, and we have an excellent moderator, Pastor Sam Neves from the General Conference. And I'll say a little bit more about him. But the panel, so the initial panel will go first. They have been prepared for a while. They will just share their experiences, share their lessons learned, best practices, etc. And then we'll open the floor to other ministers who are within the Zoom webinar platform. And the rest of you who are watching from home, you can also share your comments and questions on Facebook and YouTube. And we will do our best to juggle the questions that are coming in through the Zoom webinar platform as well as through those other platforms. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Pastor Sam Neves. I got to know a little bit about him over this period of time. And one thing I found out, which was very interesting. So he's the Associate Director of Communications at the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventist, but he's also really into video games. And he has created 2 video games, Heroes and Heroes 2. So one thing that I remember him saying in the GAIN conference, that's a major communications conference for the World Church, is that video gaming is the next frontier for ministry. So I see him as somebody who's very creative, who's looking for unique ways to minister to the people, ways to go to wherever they are. And yeah, so for me, that was a very interesting thing to find out. I also found out that he has lived in 3 continents, and maybe more. You never know when the pandemic ends. So I will hand the reins over to him, and he will share with us just a little bit about the role of communications in the church.
Excellent. Christelle, thank you very much for that introduction and for organizing this event. My life is going to these events, and this one is one of the best organized events that I've been involved with. So thank you for your leadership in doing that and for your team that has been putting this together. Friends, this is an unprecedented time, and lots of people are saying it. The world has never been what it is now in the same way that it is now. And we share something common globally at the same time, and we are aware of it. This, just 100 years ago, it would have been very difficult to communicate, to pass on information from one part of the world to the next. It was the case that if the United States General Conference wanted to communicate with Africa and Australia, it would take 2-3 months for the correspondence to arrive, and then another 2-3 months for them to respond. And so we have some events where the fields asked for some direction from the General Conference, and by the time the letter got back with the direction, they had gone in a different direction, and it was all fine anyway, because it was such a long time for communication to arrive. Now it's instant. And in this moment where we share this crisis, we have seen the church respond in different ways in different parts of the world. It would have been impossible for you to predict that voluntarily our churches around the world will close down. Because if you've been a minister for years and you're watching this broadcast, you know that before the pandemic, it doesn't matter what happens, the church has to open. Oh, but most people are on holiday, there are only 2 families around. And for those 2 families, the church will worship this Sabbath. And this has been the case for decades, over a century. And now we voluntarily closed our churches because that was the right thing to do. But what does that mean for the church? And many people are looking at this as a tragedy. Others have looked at this as an opportunity. Some of the people that looked at it as the tragedy is obvious, but there are 2 opportunities that we have observed people point out. The first is that the real church starts when the service ends, and we have failed to absorb that wholeheartedly around the world. I'll say that again. The real church starts when the service ends. A lot of people looked at the church as this event that happened in a building once a week. And missiologists and you have ecclesiologists pointing out that the church is actually the people. It is not the building. It is not the time where you meet. And the pandemic has the first and foremost pointed out that the church, even though we cannot meet at the same time on Sabbath in the building, it still exists. It is still growing strong. So that's one of the first positives. The second is that we are much more capable in digital technologies in 2021 than we have ever been before. And the investment in new technologies has been seen everywhere. Again, 10 years ago, if you came to the typical local church elder and you said, we really need to invest in digital technologies with equipment that can broadcast our services, it would be very likely that you would hear from this elder, but do we? It doesn't really matter. I don't think there is an elder today that will tell you that it doesn't matter. Which means that we are in a position where local church leadership, which is really the only leadership that truly matters when it comes to the front line, is more ready to invest in these technologies. But the question comes, what does it take for a minister to continue being a minister in times of crisis? Pastors have 3 priorities typically, and I've been a pastor for 11 years in local churches in England. The first priority to keep the lights on. If you don't meet with your board and the bills are not paid, then it's really, really bad. So you're the administrator of your churches. The second priority is preaching. You need to feed the flock. If you turn up on Sabbath and you're choosing a passage by the time you stand up to preach and you're not feeding, then it's really bad. You need to have something to say. God called you to proclaim something. So the second priority of a minister is the proclamation, is the preaching. The third priority is pastoral care and visitation. So you visit. Now this part, as well as the first 2, need to be need to rethink it. But this is what we'll focus today. What does it take to minister in a digital age? I am pursuing a PhD in digital communications and pastoral care in the University of Westminster, London. And in the last few months, I have been focusing on my literature review, which is the first part of the paper. If you are still in your right mind, do not start a PhD. It is absolute craziness. That's my advice to you. I thought it would be beautiful. It is not. It's excruciating and terrible. But you do learn. And one of the things that I came across is all of the literature, all of the research on computer-mediated communication and pastoral care, especially self-disclosure. Within pastoral care, people need to tell you what's going on in their lives. Otherwise, it's impossible to provide pastoral care. So self-disclosure is important. And the key question that I'm asking from the literature is, what is better for self-disclosure? Is it face-to-face, or is it video conferencing like we have now, or is it telephone conversations, or is it text messages backwards and back and forth? And here is what the data says, that people are least likely to share details about their lives in face-to-face interactions. So as a local church pastor, it will take you 3 years to win their trust for them to open up about the real things that are going on in their lives. If you do video conferencing, video visitation, they will share a little bit more than they would face-to-face. If you do telephone conversations, they will share even more. But nothing gets close to text messages. Text messaging, and this was very surprising to me, and I was deeply disappointed by it too, every research points that people self-disclose much more over instant messaging than they do via telephone, video conferencing, or face-to-face. And this explains why we have received so many prayer requests in the official page of the Adventist Church on social media, on Facebook in particular. So I want to share with you this data here because it has to do with pastoral care, and it's a very important data. I'm going to share with you from May last year until now, so when the pandemic really hit until this moment, I want to share with you how many people we have been ministering to on this single platform. And it may surprise you. It certainly surprised us. So this is just coming up with the number now from May last year. 1.35 million people. Not people, but messages. We've received 1.35 million prayer requests over the last year. Less than a year, in fact. This means that people in crisis from around the world have decided that they would turn to a church in order to receive pastoral care, the global page of the Adventist Church. And what they share is deeply troubling for those that are answering those questions. We had to provide psychological help for the team because it's very intimate stuff very quickly. Within 2 weeks, I have AIDS, I don't know how to tell my father. Or my husband is abusing me. Or my wife is cheating on me, I don't know what to do. And many of these are not even Christian. Why would they go to a social media page of a church and ask for someone they don't know to minister to them in a moment of crisis? And I put to you that this is the transformation. We have all been disconnected from our communities. 100 and something years ago, you would live in a village and you would know the baker, you would know the farmer, you would know the potter, you would know the butcher. And those intimate relationships meant that when the farmer's crops did not go well, you would remember and you would know that it did not go well, and as a church you would minister to him because you understood it. But then we all moved to the cities and we're disconnected. No one knows exactly what people are struggling. And the idea that someone will go to their workplace and would say, "Hey, Jack, I'm struggling with my marriage. Tell me about the Bible." If that ever happened in the past, it does not happen today. So ministry in a time of crisis such as we're living in has a profound impact in how we deal with technology in one dimension and what it means to be human. Because all of this ministry is digital, but it's not virtual. People don't want to talk to a chat bot. They want to talk to another human being. And when you have a human being on one end and another human being on another end, you have this synergy between the two, which is just mediated by a technology, but it's still humans on both ends. It's not a virtual project. It's much like we are now, human to human. And if you're watching this on YouTube, regardless of where you're watching this and when, we hope that this struggle, that as we're coming together as providers of pastoral care here, that it will be helpful to you. So let me introduce you to the panel that we have here tonight, this esteemed panel. And we will start with Pastor Andre Anderson. He was born in Toronto. He and his wife, Anetra, they have 4 children. His passions are ministry and leadership. He has served as the pastor of Shiloh Seventh-day Adventist Church in Toronto for the past 2 years. And he has pastored in the Ontario conferences since 2006. He hopes to inspire churches to see the value of moving from being event planners to ministry movements. Outside of pastoring, he likes creating music. We're going to talk to you, sir, in just a moment. We also have Pastor Jesse Annunciation. He pastors 2 churches, Bramelia, Philcan, and Waterloo Region, Philcan. He has been with the Ontario Conference for the last 19 years, and he has a degree in theology and a master's in religious education from the Adventist University of the Philippines. Pastor Jesse has been happily married to May for the last 23 years. Congratulations on that. It takes a miracle. They are blessed with 2 children who are now in university. Aime and Josiah, his mission is to lead and unite people to become passionate lovers and devoted disciples of Jesus by proclaiming and exemplifying in words and deeds Christ's transforming grace in his life. With us, we have Pastor Neftali Dorzilmi. I hope I said that not that badly. He's the lead pastor of the Adventist Francophone churches of Ottawa and Orleans. He has been serving in the Ontario Conference for the last 20 years, pastoring churches including Thunder Bay, Bethel, Meadowvale, Woodbridge, and Toronto Heritage. Pastor Dorzilmi is married to Suzette, and they have 2 grown children. He's a member of the Haitian Caucus in the North American Division and the Council of French Churches in Canada. He is also Field Secretary of the Eastern Ontario District. He serves God with hope, turning to him every day with his cry, "We are helpless, and we do not know what to do, but our eyes are upon you." That's a verse from 2 Chronicles 20:12. Next, Allison Dawn. She's a Bible worker, a retired registered nurse who graduated from New York Brunson Hospital in 1972. She is currently working for the Ontario Conference as a Bible instructor in Northern Ontario. In 2018, she graduated from Andrews University with a master's in pastoral ministry. Allison is also a new author of the book titled Divine Beauty, Divine Glory, which uncovers who God is through the book of Exodus. Excellent. Pastor Jefta Ndlovu. Now this one I probably butchered, but you can tell us how to pronounce it properly in a few moments. He's a native of Zimbabwe. He's the firstborn of Dr. Herbert and Dr. Yvonne Ndlovu, and he has 2 siblings, Sintandeo and Zolile. And all his life, he has been in the Adventist education fold. While at Andrews University, he has double majored in aviation flight and religion. In 2019, he completed his bachelor's. He has served as an Andrews University ambassador and helped pioneer a contemporary a cappella group called Watchmen. Music is his second heartbeat. Currently, he serves as an associate pastor at the Windsor and Living Faith Seventh-day Adventist churches in Windsor, Canada. Pastor Bob Windsor. He currently serves as the pastor of Nepean Seventh-day Adventist Church. In 1991, he graduated from Canadian University College with a behavioral sciences BSc. He wears many hats, among them leader, youth motivational speaker, teacher, and pastor. Pastor Bob is the founder of the People Matter Project, a compassion-based ministry affiliated with Nepean Church that serves, supports, and encourages the Nepean Barhaven community and beyond. In the downtime, you may find him fishing or taking photos. And that's our list of panelists that we have here tonight. Christelle, I pass it back to you.
So we are going to start with the panel that you have just introduced. I just wanted to give a shout out. I had forgotten to do so before. Pastor Artisan Bernardo, who's in the attendees, he's in the background. So he asked for a shout out to his group from Faith Filipino and let me see, I think it's Mississauga Filipino. So I just wanted to thank you for joining us, and I want to thank all of you who are watching on Facebook and YouTube. We really appreciate your support of this initiative, and we hope that this conversation will help to build bridges between our ministers and the rest of our church members and other leaders. So I will hand it back to you, Pastor Neves, and you can get started with some of the discussion.
Excellent. Okay, so let's start with let me pick a victim here. I will pick Pastor Jesse. Let's start with you. So what has been your experience in this pandemic?
Good evening to everyone. Thank you, Pastor Neves. Thank you, Christelle, for allowing us to take part in this worthwhile endeavor. COVID has directly impacted us at Bramley as we have lost 2 of our beloved brothers to this disease. One of them is our esteemed Pathfinder director, well loved and respected by our church. He is also the first health worker in Ontario to have died due to COVID. The other victim is a father of a young pastor who is now assigned as a youth pastor in one of the big churches here in Ontario. As of last week, a husband and wife, parents of 3 young children, were both diagnosed as well with the disease. But by God's grace, they have no need of hospitalization, but they are experiencing slight to moderate symptoms. Since the pandemic began, we've had a total of about 25 people from different households who have been sick with COVID. And aside from these 2 deaths, all of them have recovered fully, except for the couple who are still battling this disease. Bramley, with about 200 active members, has been streaming our services, Vespers and Divine Service, and some other special services over the last 2.5 years through Facebook Live. Before the lockdown, we usually reach about 50 viewers and engagement of about 20 to 25 every week. Now, during this lockdown, where we have gone fully virtual, we now engage at least 350 to 400 viewers at Facebook every week, and about 60 to 70 logged-in devices via Zoom. Now, my other church, Waterloo Region Philcam, is another scenario. This is a new church that was organized only last November 2017. We have about 40 active members. We didn't have any online presence prior to the lockdown, and so we were forced to adjust to this new reality by having to learn quickly and adapt quickly to the new reality. And by God's grace, through the ministry of our youth and a few knowledgeable adults, we were able to stream our services as soon as we knew that our church was going to be locked down. And so as of now, we are able to reach more people through our virtual services. Instead of having only about 40 people inside the physical building on Sabbaths, we are able to engage at least 50 people via our Facebook broadcast and at least 20 devices logged into our Zoom platform during our worship service. Now, prior to the lockdown, we were conducting a once-a-week physical small group meeting every week. After the lockdown, we are now able to host nightly. That's nightly devotional service via Zoom and Facebook Live. And this is conducted by our elders, not by me, but by our elders. At least 10 to 15 devices are joining this nightly devotional service. And so I would say that the pandemic has broadened our reach as we have regular attendees from different parts of the world through our Facebook stream. And so this lockdown has brought us to come together for worship and prayer sessions more often than before when the pandemic hit.
Okay. How many of you were prepared for this? Let me see just the hands from the panelists. Was your church ready? Let's start with the technology. Were you streaming before? Okay, so a few were, okay. Had you ever visited people, or did you visit people regularly with digital means? So telephone or video or some other way of visiting and talking to them. If you did, put your hand up. Let's see, we have most of the panelists, you were doing that already. So most of you are streaming, and most of you were already doing that beforehand. So you were prepared for this. Pastor Andre, let me come to you now. How did you, not so much what happened in your church, but for you, I would like you to go into, how did you minister in this moment where you couldn't be with people? Because there is a profound truth to the incarnational ministry where you are rubbing shoulders with people and you are near them physically. Now you cannot be physically near them. How did you minister during this time?
Well, Pastor Neves, thanks. Great question. It's nice to be on the panel with everyone. I won't take too long, but I'll say this. One of the philosophies that I've always had in ministry is that leadership is a shared value. And, often whenever there are crises, pastors have a tendency of becoming all things to their congregation just because of the way that we're hardwired. I'm grateful that I belong to a church where when this pandemic started, there were quite a few individuals where we were able to have a leadership meeting of sorts with various departments that were historically connecting to the congregation. And we began to ask ourselves, how can we divide this work up so that we can connect to the congregation together? So in my context, my prayer team, my interest coordinators, my clerks, my elders, my deacons, once we took a look at our church listing, we divided it up, and various departments, various individuals, we all became pastors in that moment. And so I'm grateful for that experience through the Shiloh team. And if I can just do this, since there was a shout out earlier, I just want to shout out the Shiloh Seventh-day Adventist Church. Thank you, Pastor Neves.
Excellent. Guys, if you have questions as you're watching this, either on social media or you've got questions here on Zoom, you can have a QA feature on Zoom at the bottom. It says QA right next to the little hand. And I don't think you see the hand, we do, but you can just go in and select Q&A and ask your question. It will pop up here for us, and I will ask it for the panelist, or you can just add it to the chat. You should be very familiar with Zoom by now. Most of us are. Zoom ninjas. Okay, Pastor Neftali, let me come to you. How have you found this shift compared to what it used to be before? You're muted, sir. Which is the sentence that we hear all the time, at least once a day, right? That's the sentence of 2020. Hopefully. Yeah, might be 2021 as well. Well, whilst Pastor Neftali is trying to release the microphone there, clicking the mute button. Not quite yet.
I'm on. There we are. All right.
We hear you, sir.
All right. Well, I just want to say thank you for asking the question, and the pleasure of mine to be part of this activities this evening. Let me say this, coronavirus has took us by surprise, and no one was ready to do what we are doing right now. But with the help of my elders and the team of the technician we have in our church, we have managed to deal with some of the issues, and with my elders, we have been able to keep contacts with our members. With our technicians, we have been able to use the telephone, first of all, and the radio, and also the Zoom, so that our services can be relayed on those ways, so that we can keep in touch with our people. In terms of ministry, we do visiting through telephone with the elders. We do visiting through Zoom also, so that we can see our people and can talk with them. And also this opportunity we have to have meetings with our people more often, through prayer meetings in the morning at 5:30. In midday we have prayer meeting also, and we have Bible studies that help us to be closer to the people in terms of activities and spiritual growth. So that's, in that sense, the COVID has been a blessing. However, it has not been a good thing, because we lost, our membership has lost the physical contact, like the singing together, the fellowship meals, and the interaction with one another they used to have. We have lost that. And then the togetherness of worship experience, it's something that is really missing in our congregation. And we believe that worship online can never replace worship in presential. One of the things that really hit our members, we have a lot of elderly people who may have some difficulties in using technologies, so that they don't benefit fully of all the activities that we are doing. And one other thing I noticed also is that although we know our members are around, but you never know how many, how much, who is there, who's not there, because COVID gave way to members to do church hopping, so that you may think they are with you, but they may not be in fact. So those are the things that I've noticed and we experience, but I could say for the church, it has been a good thing for us to get into some spiritual activities during COVID.
Excellent. Thank you, Pastor. You mentioned something really profound there, which is, you can have these emergency procedures and technology for worship where you have access to the content of a sermon. Maybe you can listen to music, but it's not the same as being together and worshiping.
That's
And we all can feel this. I don't know if you have been back to a service. Let me give you, and Pastor Bob, I'm coming to you next. It seems that we are not sure when we come back to worship how to behave anymore. I have noticed this, that when we come to a building and we all socially distance and we are all in our seats with our family and so on, toward the end of next year, there was some loosening here in Maryland we allowed for more people to attend. I think it was up to 40% capacity, something like that. And we noticed that people were very uncomfortable in a way. They were not sure how to behave, how to handle this. And there are some cultures that this is more difficult than others. In Latin-based cultures, you have to touch. You see each other, you've got to give a hug, you've got to
right.
touch. Otherwise, you're saying to the other that they are not part of your tribe. They're not really close to you. And even when we do come back normally during the pandemic, we couldn't do that. So it was a very odd dynamic there. So Pastor Bob, why don't you share with us some of your thoughts as you observed all that is being said in terms of both worship and the things that changed?
Thank you, folks, for inviting me to be a part of the panel and for the question. I'm from Newfoundland. We love big. We touch everybody. My good buddy, Pastor Paul Casey, is on here. I should get an amen from him because we love big. And touching is so important to us. There are 52 cultures represented at Nepean. And the Brazilians love big. They touch their, okay, so we're on it. And so here we were coming to church, and we kind of saw it coming. And Nepean, I got to admit, they were amazing about this. When we were allowed to come to church, but couldn't touch each other, we did the elbows and we did everything we could. But you could see the strain as we were required to stand apart, wear masks. It was strange for people to be staggered throughout the church when 30% of us were allowed back into the church. And I tell you, it was so difficult for me to preach to an empty room when we were live streaming and all I had was my audiovisual team and the room's empty and I've got nobody to resonate off of. And I know I'm a live wire. I'm a people person. I missed Sarah saying, amen, preach it, pastor. And, Maurice's smiles and even the people who did their, I just missed my family. And that had to be the hardest part for me was I never felt so lonely in ministry as when I had to preach to an empty room. It was one of the most lonely moments for me because I miss my people. I miss my church family. And that was so difficult for all of us. I could see it in the AV team. I could see it with the people who would come in and they'd have to come in and then go out. And it was like, it just didn't feel, it felt off. And it was, again, the loneliest time for me in ministry was an empty church.
Do you think you and others have already grieved enough for the lack of this, or have we just begun to grieve for this loss of what we took for granted perhaps before?
You speak of loss, and there were so many losses. I lost greeting people at the back of the church, the new faces that would come through, the miracles that would take place out in the foyer after church. Grieved the loss of that. Hugging people, touching people. One of the most difficult things, I think, for me was I had church members suffering and I couldn't come alongside them. That's hard. That's very hard. And we're not over that. We're not over it. And I learned a new term called compassion burnout, where I was burnt out from all of the stories of loss and this feeling of helplessness, because I couldn't even come and put my arm around you.
Sure.
I couldn't touch you. And for me, that's so key to ministry and who I am as a person and who my church members are as people. Nepean touches each other, and we're still grieving it. We're still not good with it.
Yeah.
And I don't think we ever will be.
Right. Allison, let me come to you. What has been your experience as you minister to others? And before you answer that, we have here, Weber has a comment. He wants to thank Pastor Anderson for posting something encouraging and inspiring on Facebook to lift everybody's spirits every day. So thank you for that. We have a comment from Jay Snag. There was Zoom out there, but only being used by offices. Then everyone discovered Zoom. This could have been an option before the lockdown for some of our meetings. That is absolutely right. There is new technology, and I'm going to ask Pastor Jeff, you can start preparing for that one. I'm going to ask you about what are the things that we will never be able to go back on now that there is this new world that has emerged. Even when COVID is done, please Jesus soon, what are the things that will not change from this period of change? But Allison, I want to hear from you about the Bible studies, the pastoral care, and so on, please.
Thank you very much for allowing me to be a part of this panel. And thank you, Pastor Neves, for this question. It's been difficult. Where before I would be able to be in intimate conversations with individuals who are looking for Bible studies, and sharing with them, seeing the light come on in their eyes when, that's what it means. Oh, I did not realize this. I have learned so much. To going on, having to do a deep, steep learning curve that I'm going backwards on in a way, trying to figure out how to get the Zoom to function the way it's supposed to. And as Pastor Bob said, most people would have their faces blacked out because Zoom was having trouble trying to keep up with it. The reaction time was very slow. It was jerky and so forth like this. And so you're preaching to all these blank squares and you have no idea whether you're getting through or not. Partway through, when the lockdown was gone, being in Northern Ontario, we are very close-knit communities. We're small communities. My community I'm in, Cochrane, is 5,500 people. We know each other. We call each other by name as we're passing them on the street. Now all of a sudden we have to be on the other side of the street or put our mask on when we're coming to before them, or it's not easy. I'm single. I'm alone. And I've always enjoyed being with people when I'm sharing the gospel. There's nothing more exciting than sharing the gospel and having them in front of you, not knowing where they are. But also I recognize that there are people out there that will write in and ask questions about something. And I try to respond in a way that hopefully will answer the question. And with texting,
Yeah.
you don't know the tone of voice.
Right.
You can't see the facial expression, and that's lonely.
Yeah.
You feel as though you're talking to a brick wall and you're not really sure if you're going anywhere. The last several months, few months, I feel as I'm on a treadmill going absolutely nowhere. What am I doing? I have no idea.
That's really, it's remarkable that you are sharing this with us because it's very real. And I want to thank you for your vulnerability and sharing that we don't have it all together and we are just figuring this out as we go along. My mother is a co-porter and church planter, Bible worker, and so on for 3 decades now. And she has pointed out, and I want to ask you this, Allison, as well. She mentioned to me that most people, in her experience, they don't quit halfway through a Bible study because you're there at the same time all the time. So you say you're going to be there on Tuesday at 7 p.m. And it doesn't matter if it rains, it doesn't matter if it snows, it doesn't matter what happens. You're there at 7 p.m. and they know that you're there. They know the effort that you're putting in, and just that effort speaks volumes to them, and they don't have the courage to stop the Bible study because of your effort. Now online, it's very easy. And we have found that a lot of people give up on their Bible studies after the third or fourth lesson because it's not addressing the questions that they are really deeply searching for, and they prefer just to go to YouTube and find someone else to answer those questions. What have you found in your Bible studies digitally that is different from face to face?
I think the number one thing that I found that was completely different, when we had the Adventist church, we have all these wonderful study guides and everything. And I'm jumping all over the place. It's not sequence anymore. I'm answering their question on whatever topic. State of the Dead comes later on in the lessons. And if they've lost someone to COVID,
That's what you talk about.
that's what you talk about.
That's
If they
very
want,
insightful.
you have to talk to them where they're at.
That's
You
very
know,
insightful. So, Jeffy, let me come to you. The question is, church used to be normal to us. We understood it. And out of all the panelists here, you seem to be the youngest, which means that you're going to be in ministry for longer than any of the other panelists. What is it that you believe will happen in the future that that will carry the effects of the pandemic? In other words, what is it that this new normal has brought that will be permanent, even when we go back to whatever normal looked like?
Allow me to be thankful. And of course, in my culture, seeing that I'm the youngest here, in my culture, they teach us that when you're amidst adults, you don't speak much. But I'm sorry, forgive me if the spirit takes over tonight here. I think, Pastor Andre, please behave. Okay. One of the things that comes to mind is a statement that I shared with Christelle, and I concur with many of the people that have shared their thoughts on the pandemic. This is what I sent to her. I said, my submission on COVID is that the pandemic has evidently incapacitated an already crippled world. The world was crippled already, but the pandemic came and ravished and sabotaged everything that we had. But I went on to say, in a positive retrospect, the season has also echoed the words of Mandy Hale. This is what she says: change is painful, but nothing is as painful as staying stuck somewhere where you don't belong. So I think with that said, you're asking me to be prophetic here. What are some things that are going to change? How do I see the dynamic as we move forward? I think a lot of it goes with the lesson that I absorbed along the way, which is adapt. I think we need to adapt in every sphere of our lives, be it in ministry, or else we're going to be extinct before our time. Mind you, I'm only 1 year and a few months in ministry, and I came to the conference here in September of 2019. And you can imagine that after being here for only 3-4 months, then the pandemic hit. So it was a season of me trying to grapple with being new and understanding what ministry is. And then the next thing, I have to adapt to something that I don't know what it is. But shout out to my pastor Kolovenko and the ministerial team and my church here in Windsor, who have been kind with me. And I'm going to speak from a youth perspective to say, I think one of the major things that young people are gravitating towards too in this pandemic is trying to change the whole system and learning that some things that we've been doing past necessarily that haven't been bad. The pandemic has exposed that some things are not going to work for us moving into the future.
Thank you. We have a couple of thoughts here from YouTube, especially. We have Mavis Griffin. She says, I think when we return, God's people will be overwhelmed. We'll be so excited and a bit confused. So we'll go wild with hugging. She says she loves hugging. So that's a comment there from Mavis. We have Paul Casey mentioned here in the chat. Just a thought, as we endeavor in these COVID days to go out to minister to people in the real world through social media, we had better learn to change some of our ways and learn to reach people and help them where they are. Let me now talk about ministering. We talked about pastoral care. Now let's talk about preaching a little bit. And this is what we have observed. If people listened to one sermon every week before the pandemic, they started to listen to 3 to 5 sermons every week. And they have access now to the best preachers in the world. How do you feel about that? Let me open this up for any of you. Your congregation is listening to the best preachers in the world. What are your thoughts and feelings about that? Is that good? Is that bad? Do any of you feel insecure about this? Has it helped you to up your game, in preaching and so on? Tell me if you had any thoughts about it, any of you. Just raise your hand and I'll come to you. Pastor Andre.
Let me also say this before I respond. As a pastor who has to preach, I have also been thoroughly filled by the preaching that I've been able to receive. As pastors, generally speaking, on a Saturday morning or a Saturday, we are at church all day long from 9 whatever till whenever the building closes. And then, of course, we have meetings on Sunday, we regroup on Monday, and the list goes on. So during this pandemic, I have been filled consistently by being able to find new preachers, as well as being able to connect with some of the speakers that I usually would not have time for. Now, as a speaker myself, as a pastor whose church now has gone online since this pandemic, there's a couple of things that I always process. There may be better speakers out there on the planet, but they don't know my church the way that I know my church. So during this pandemic, I'm not necessarily speaking to the world. I'm speaking to my congregation and hoping that the principles that are being shared there will be embraced by others who may tune in. And so there is no insecurity there, right? Because the reality is God is using every single pastor, Bible worker, whoever it is that is sharing the gospel at this time, because what may be the best to somebody else may not be for someone else. So after we get past, as Pastor Bob said, the reality of preaching to the pew, and of course the AV team, they're so busy trying to get the microphone up and down, we don't even know if they've heard the sermons throughout the pandemic. But the reality is that we have to recognize that every single one of us is reaching somebody. And for me, that's what helps me to keep going. I'm not necessarily going for the views. I want to make sure that is what I'm preaching biblical? Is it relevant? And does it give hope? As long as I've done all of that, every single Sabbath, I feel as though I've done my part. And those that can reach 20 and 30,000, God bless them, because they have a heavier burden. And for the rest of us that are reaching maybe a smaller demographic, that's okay too.
Those are some solid principles there. You know, you talked about biblical, so you've got truth, relevance, hope. Those are some things to go by. Pastor Jesse, and then I'm going to come to Pastor Jeffy again.
No, I don't really mind when I hear about my members, following a certain well-known Seventh-day Adventist preacher, such as Dwight Nelson or Doug Batchelor. I really feel, that we can support every one of us because we're preaching the same message. What I'm actually concerned about is that there are some members in our church, my church as well, who are following some YouTube preachers who are, questionable. They purport to be representing the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but their teachings are based on fear and paranoia of the end times and distrust of our leaders and conspiracy theories. That's what I am concerned about. And I hope that our conference leadership would do some more in counteracting these online ministries, which are causing disturbance in the minds of some of our members.
Yeah, this is a global problem. And we have this bait mechanism. When I was a teenager, I tell you what, conspiracy theories destroyed my faith for many years. Because I was always my faith went up and down to the degree to which we received VHS tapes with the latest theories. And if you're watching this and you don't know what VHS tapes are, Google it. We would listen to this incredible speaker talking about current events or distorting current events to fit a particular fear description. We call these conspiracy theories. And then your faith will be up. Jesus is coming. Fantastic. But then, nothing would happen. And then your faith would plummet because it wasn't based on your love for Jesus or his love for you. It was based on whatever was happening in the political world. And I think we learned not to put our faith in politics. We should have learned that by now. And I think you're right, Pastor Jesse. If you have your members watching good, solid, biblical sermons, fantastic. Maybe we could even encourage them by sending a list that they can focus on. But if they're watching poisoned, if they're eating poisoned mental food, it will come to bear in their faith. And sometimes it is very complicated. I believe that there are wolves in sheep's clothing. And the shepherd needs to be very careful with how they look at and they treat the wolves. So it's a serious thing. Pastor Neftali, you had your hand up, and then Pastor Jeffy, I'm going to come back to you.
Well, it was just to go along with Pastor Jesse. We have this kind of problem in our church. We know many people are following other preachers. However, they come up with some instructions and ideas that are completely contrary to what we are teaching in our church. However, in my church, in my both churches, we make sure that we preach sermons to help people to build their faith. So those who may go out and follow other instruction, we see the result, and they are now panicking, and some are packing up, going away because of fear. So that is a very negative aspect of the COVID situation. And I agree with Pastor Jesse, if the conference could really take some action to help us in that situation. Yeah.
Thank you. Pastor Jeffy, and then there are many comments we're going to go back to in the chat.
I think the reality that we have is that there's access to technology that you can people on what they watch. You can't tell them what to see, what not to see. But one thing that I remember is what I spoke with my pastor Kolovenko, senior pastor, about. He told me in this season, we need to maintain local relationships. And if we maintain local relationships, it's like in a family. I grew up in the motherland. And if anybody knows anything about the motherland, is that if you disobey, you are going to meet with your father later for a holy discussion that might involve a belt. But that did not take away the love that I have for my father. He's still one of the best person in my life now. So what I'm saying by that is the family dynamics remain. In as much as there are exterior things that might be happening. You might have TD Jakes, I love him. You might have all these other powerful preachers, but people always remember to come back home as long as there is a local relationship with them. Because at the end of the day, when they die, TD Jakes doesn't come bury them. We bury them. At the end of the day, if there's a wedding, shout out to the first wedding that I did last year. I think the connection remains powerful, such that when you are about to preach, you know the needs of the people. And we can't be concerned about everybody who's doing their calling, even in the time of Jesus.
Yes.
There were many people who were preaching, but Jesus still had people who came to listen to them. So I'll end this with saying it should be an inspiration that this season has given us, that people have access to a lot of technology, in the sense that my pastor says these words, that if you're a leader, you need to have followers, or else if you don't have followers, you're just taking a walk in the park. So this is an introspective moment for many of us, that if it's not a competition, but it's a reality check to say, be in touch with the people, because once you are in touch with the people, they'll stick to you. And if God has anointed your calling, nobody else can take away.
Thank you. Let's talk about the comments here. We have Clara saying, the pandemic has exposed that the Sabbath school is the avenue for relationship building. I am part of a Sabbath school that meets online. And we meet on Zoom every Sabbath morning, and that has become my church. I attend Spencerville Seventh-day Adventist Church, and I don't know, there are like 3,000 members or what have you. But my church is that group of 20 people that meet for Sabbath school. That's our church. That's the church I can rely on. Those are the people that know me, that understand my prayer requests, that I'm praying for them. It's this small group that we have in Sabbath school. So, Clara, that's true. Let me ask the group here. Do you have online Sabbath school, or did that just stop? You have it? You have it? Yes? No? Yeah? Ish? So that's something for you to consider, that just having a reason to come together and discuss something meaningful may be what it takes for you to create those relationships at a given time. Next, here, Paul says, it has been very disappointing to me that some of our church members choose other church Sabbath programs versus their own church. And this is definitely something to watch out for. You have your own church, and all of a sudden, your members are preferring to worship elsewhere. But I think what Pastor Jeffy was saying is, it doesn't matter who they're listening to. Their church is their church. The more you minister to them and you build those relationships with you and other leaders, the more they will have that sense of family. You can go and eat in a restaurant, but you know who your mother is. You don't lose sight of that. Okay, so Orlando says from YouTube, no. Norwell Simmons says, is there a plan in place to help those of our members who are not technologically savvy and are struggling to get online to worship? So, pastors, what has your churches done to help members who don't know how to connect and are learning this now? Did you have to help them? What was the plan? Anyone? Okay, Pastor Andre.
Yeah, so at my church, I want to say I have some of the gifted, probably the world's gifted people on our AV communication. And of course, every pastor feels like that about their team. At the beginning of our term, in March 21st was the beginning of this journey for us here in Ontario. One of the things we did when we met together collectively with all of the key departments that had various functions when we met with our communications team, we made sure that not only did we have a service that would be available for those that are on YouTube or on Zoom, we made sure that our seniors had access to the information to dial in. And so one of the things we wanted to make sure we were doing as a church was we were being inclusive, right? So it's great that we have more YouTube subscribers and all of those other individuals tuning in, but we did recognize that for some of our seniors, they don't use a tablet, they don't use a laptop, they don't have a desktop. Some of them have some health concerns, but surely they know how to dial a local number that would give them access to our services. So I think at the front end of this thing, and of course, we're still working it through. I don't want to paint this picture of having, pie in the sky and so on and so forth. I know that there are still seniors, even within my congregation, who are struggling, but I think by and large, we were able to connect with individuals because we were intentional. And maybe that's the word that I really want to punch here in this conversation. What has made this pandemic, I think, manageable for a lot of us as pastors is that we have tried to be intentional. When we have found that there are issues, we didn't try to troubleshoot it once or twice. We kept hitting at it until we fixed the problem, whether it was the video or the volume or the connection through the Ethernet. We just kept going until we had the problem fixed because we didn't have a choice.
Thank you. Let's not forget those members that cannot connect and use the teams to help them. Thank you for that. Karen Baker says, are there churches in GTA for sign language online? What's GTA? Anybody know?
Greater Toronto Area.
Greater
Okay.
Toronto area.
Excellent. Now I know. The only GTA I know is a game, and it's not pleasant. So I don't think there are churches in GTA game for sign language online. Don't think there are. But in the Greater Toronto area, are there churches for sign language or not? That any one of you know of?
I know.
Maybe not. Okay, so there's an idea for ministry. If somebody wants to take that on, that will be fantastic. Danielle says, I have enjoyed being able to access former churches' Zoom programs, but I have made a point of supporting and participating in my own church program. Some people don't attend their home church services at all, and that is not good. We are going to start in a few minutes the extended panel, which is all the attendees that are here. And if you're an attendee and you want to say something, we'll bring you in. Pastor Bob, you have your hand up.
We were intentional about surveying our church members to see where they were with the technology, who was following Sabbath school, who was following the streamed worship services. Were they aware of people who weren't able to access the services? And we did that, a couple of months into this to get a feel for what we were doing, to gauge how people were responding. What we found was with our 52 cultures, and I was one of them, on Sabbath morning, I would tune into Newfoundland, which was an hour and a half ahead of us, and then come back to Nepean. And for Sabbath school, we lost church members because they were going back to Brazil, or they were going back to Mexico, or they were going back to other parts of the world to connect with their families, but they were faithful in coming back to Nepean. And we praise God for the fact that Nepean was still home. So we were very intentional about tracking what was happening with our church family.
Thank you for that. What is the advice that you have for pastors that are slow to adapt to change during COVID? So who wants to take that? Pastor Neftali, you haven't said much. Let me come to you. Help us here. So pastors are like, I don't know, I don't want to change. What would you suggest to them?
Well, since COVID started, there are many places or companies that are giving training, either how to stand in front of a camera or how to use some of the technical aspect. So me as a baby boomer, I've tried to learn this way, and I would also encourage my colleagues to search and find places where they could learn. And even with the NAD, they can have the opportunity to learn some of those aspects of technology that can help them in the service, in the ministry.
Thank you. Pastor Jesse.
Before I make a comment on that particular question, I just would like to go back to the idea of the Sabbath school. We have transitioned our Sabbath school from the end of 2019 to become a holistic small group. I'd like to make a shout out to my Sabbath school leaders at my church for what they have been doing. I think this is the way to go, truly. In our church, our Sabbath school classes are extending up into the afternoon because it's now viable for them to extend their meeting. And the Sabbath school is not just about learning about the lesson. It is the care group of our church. And we are directing our Sabbath school to become the place where they can truly do church even during the week. And so this is the direction that we must take. This pandemic has helped us to recognize and to realize the importance of holistic small groups. Now, in terms of pastors who may be resistant to change, no, I don't think any pastor would be able to survive if they would not adopt. Because this is our new reality, and so it's either we adopt or we die in our ministry.
Yeah, it's true. Mavis says, pastors, don't worry. The members may go shopping, but they always come back. Don't worry about that. So a word of encouragement there. Kwame says, one thing that I've personally realized since lockdown is that as a minister, it has also taught me to stop and slow down. We now have time for God, to make sure God is the center of everything that we do. Pastor Jeffy, I saw your hand there. Go ahead, sir.
I wanted to say I've experienced a lot of my colleagues in many different conferences around the world who some show a little resistance to adapting. But I always mention to them that if we're a prophetic church that believes in Daniel and the Revelation, it says knowledge shall increase. And if knowledge shall increase, technology also helps that knowledge to increase. And immediately I see their conversion. So if there's somebody who's refusing and being resistant today, I say, be converted, knowledge needs to increase. In the quote of one of my fellow pastors who shared it on Facebook recently, he says, social media has become the most powerful pulpit in the world. No serious preacher can afford to ignore it. And I'll make this more personal. I think there's a joke that went around when COVID started that said, back in the days, pastors used to say, Facebook is satanic, that's mark of the beast, they're going to track you down. But it's funny because a lot of the pastors these days will be on your face saying, hey, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, check out my Facebook. So it's the reality. Even my dad, who is a pastor, now a professor, used to say he doesn't need Facebook. He is Facebook. But guess what? I was sitting with him earlier this year in 2020, creating a Facebook account for him. So I'll just give an encouragement to say, if there's somebody who might be resistant to trying it out, just inspire them to take the first step. So you be the someone in shoes, because I think many of us are encouraging people to join social media, but what we are doing on social media does not reflect stuff that people would want to be on social media for. So if you're going to preach out there, do it excellently. If you're going to share a quote like Pastor Andre, do it excellently. When I grow up, I want to be like Pastor Andre. That's it. Thank you.
Well, Pastor Andre, you had your hand up, and if you're watching this and you're a panelist, an attendee, you can just put your hand up to speak. I can't see you, so not physically. Press the button, otherwise you'll be like this all night, and I won't see you. So go ahead and raise a hand at the bottom there somewhere, and then I can bring you in accordingly. But Pastor Andre, you had your hand up.
I want to say that perspective is important, and I appreciate the comments that are rolling. I'm enjoying this conversation. One of the things we have to consider as well is what the pandemic has done for the church families. I mean, you think about what a Sabbath looks like for the average pastor, Bible worker, leader in the church. If you talk to 5 people throughout the day, you're lucky, depending on who it is that you get stuck with for that first conversation. But this pandemic has allowed for families to be at home together for the first time in over 100 years, right? I am certain now that there are more families having Sabbath lunches together, more families that are just in the house together. Now, we do understand, because we've seen some of the research that's coming back, that there's some increase in domestic violence and some of the other challenges. Yes, those are the negatives. But this pandemic has created an environment that allows for us to now speak more about the importance of family. So I get it, and I don't want to diminish what's happening, especially south of the border. I mean, almost 500,000 people have already died or close to, heading in that direction. It's terrible, but I'm also choosing to see what the opportunities are. And some of those opportunities, and even when we talk about leading in this pandemic, one of the things that I've said from my church is there's no more overlapping meetings. We support all of the programs that we do together as one church family. So if there's only one slot for Zoom, we're all on Zoom. If there's one slot for YouTube, we're all together, because that's how we're going to get through this pandemic. It's not the vaccine that's going to get us through this thing. Number one, we know it's the Spirit of God. But number two, just as everyone's talking about the herd mentality, I'm talking about the herd mentality as it relates to the church. And right now, and maybe I can say this because I know there's a lot of people that are listening, see this as an opportunity to connect with your close connections and then extend from there. This may never happen like this again for another 100 years, or if Jesus comes sooner. But what we can do is seize the opportunities by changing our perspective. Last thing, a lot of our churches, the longer we're here, what's beginning to happen is people are beginning to try to duplicate what we were doing in the sanctuary before the pandemic and put it online. I say to those individuals, forget about it. A lot of our churches were declining in weekly attendance because of the same program over and over. Try something new. You don't have to be like the church down the street, but surely you can add a new song or a new video or a new something to share Jesus in a different kind of way. But that won't happen unless we change our perspective and look for the opportunities in this pandemic.
Allison, Bob, and then Pastor Bernardo has just joined us here. Go ahead.
Going on with what Pastor Andre was saying, that we need to change our perspective. That's true. But I think we also have to take that perspective and realize there's a future. And that future is going to be vastly different from what we came from. We're not going to, Pastor Neves, you said you were a member of a 3,000 member church. Guess what? That church will no longer exist. There'll be small groups of 25, 30 people. And that's about the size of what all the churches are going to be. Our large churches are done. We need to look at the idea of getting outside of our church walls. Don't think that we're going to be going back anytime soon into our church walls. It's not going to happen.
Pastor Bob.
For those who are struggling with the idea of change, we need to understand that the world changed and it isn't going back. We are not going back to status quo. We may recapture some certain elements, but certainly the world has changed forever. At Nepean, our mission is to help people become fully devoted followers of Jesus. And that means if I'm going to preach the gospel, I've got to go where the people are. If I want to go where my son's friends are, I got to go online. If I want to go where my wife's friends are, I've got to go online. If I want to go where my old friends are, they're online. And here's the thing, COVID happened, and yet Nepean has had baptisms. And going into the new year, we've already got more baptisms lined up, and we didn't knock on a single door, hard door, but we've been knocking on virtual doors around the world. We now have a world audience. And so change or die. In all honesty, the world has gone digital, and anybody who does not get that, your days are numbered. They truly are, and that would be a sad thing to see happen to any church.
Pastor Bernardo, you have some thoughts.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Well, just want to share with you how this COVID has been a blessing to my ministry, my family, and my churches. When COVID hit, um, I had to make a decision whether I will continue to, maintain the usual stuff that we used to do and just move it online. But early on, we decided that we had to do things differently, and some of the things that we did was, I combined both of my churches. I don't have to be in one church at a time and be at my other church during the next week, just as I used to. So I combined the resources, I combined the manpower, I just merely combined everything that we can. And, we had a more inspiring service together. We shared leadership. We shared our ideas and, things like that. And I think one of the good things that enabled us to transition to this digital ministry is that the year before COVID came, both of my churches closed a regular worship service for 2 Sabbaths because we want to, quote unquote, force everyone into small group ministry. So that's what we did. We shut down the church for 2 Sabbaths during the year in 2019. And so we have set up, various small groups in my church. And, I am so blessed personally as a pastor because on average, I spend about 3,000 kilometers. I cover 3,000 kilometers in a month.
Wow.
On average. It could be more. But I get to visit all the small groups, most of them during the week. And those who are meeting at the same time, I get to visit them the following week. And that is amazing. That is amazing. Say one of my small group that meets on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and they still meet on Saturday night. So, that was amazing. And they studied the lesson. By the way, we don't have, for one of my churches, I don't have a regular Sabbath school lesson, an hour, 2 hour lesson during the Sabbath. We just have a 5-minute review of the lesson because during the week, the small groups studied the lesson for about 2 hours. Normally in the church, we would just study the lesson for about 15 minutes and then it's time for worship service. This time, they studied the lesson for about 2 hours. And I think one of the blessings that I have experienced is that after the study, whether it's a study on a particular curriculum, because they're on different curriculums, right? If I join one group at 3 o'clock, I'd be able to join the 4:30 group, move to the 6 o'clock group, then move to the 8 o'clock group. The last group that I have on a Sabbath meets at around 7:30. They end at 9. As soon as we end at 9, everybody stays and we chat until 10, until 11 o'clock at night. I would have not been able to do that during the regular, church service and small groups because, I have to go home. My wife is waiting for me. My family is waiting for me. But I'm able to just sort of know what's going on in the lives of my members because of these groups. So I think my advice for pastors who are really challenged, you don't have to be technologically knowledgeable about all this stuff. Zoom is a very good platform, as what Pastor Andre mentioned a while ago. You don't need to minister to 1,000 people. If you can minister to a few who would then minister to more people beyond your reach, you've been a blessing tremendously, for sure.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Let's see a few more comments here. We have Paul Casey adding a study that provides another opportunity. Pastor Bernardo strikes me as a silver lining kind of guy because where others see a disaster, he sees opportunities. And here's another one for us. In a recent study by Gray Meta Research found, this is Paul Casey posting, that in the last 12 months, over 17 million American adults who don't regularly attend worship services visited the website of a local church or place of worship. And this is an important element for us to remember, that people may not enter our buildings, but they will find us online. They will find us somehow. So you need your listing. Let's go through some of the basic stuff here. Your Google listing needs to be updated with the times of the small groups, with the Zoom links that the people can join, with some form of security so that you're not opening up for everybody. But you need to be updated with your social media places, and Google Maps is a very important part of that. Let me see who else. Rose Kelly says, God is allowing COVID-19 for us to go back to basics, but more so for the gospel to reach the world. Technology is the way to go. And Pastor Jeffy mentioned that when Facebook came out, there were lots of pastors like, oh, this is from the devil. Actually, this is a common thing in Christianity. Whenever new technology comes, Christians just immediately give it to the devil. It's like when radio came, guess what Christians did? Well, radio is from the devil. And the devil looked at it and said, mine? I'll use it. And he started to use it. And then Christians, you know what? We should probably be on the radio. So then we go to the radio and we use it for the glory of God. Many people came to find Jesus through the radio. But then television came. And guess what Christians did when television came? It's from the devil. And the devil said, they're so generous. I'm going to use it. And he used it. And then we wake up to it when people are on it. And we're like, you know what? We should probably be preaching the gospel here and proclaiming it. And then we use it. And it's the same with every new technology. I encounter this when we talk about gaming, because a third of the population of the planet almost are gamers. 3.4 billion. I think that's it. So people are playing games. Everybody's playing games, mobile games, console games. And when people were reading newspapers, we started publishing houses to reach them. When people were listening to radio, we created radio stations to reach them, to proclaim the three angels' messages there. When people were watching television, we created television stations to proclaim the three angels' messages to them. So now that people are playing games, you know what we're going to do? We're going to set up game studios to proclaim the three angels' messages to them. We need to be where people are. That's the incarnational principle. And there is a quote here that has been mentioned, you change or die. I think Pastor Bob mentioned that. I know it's slightly differently. It's how does it go? Refusing to change and holding your breath have something in common. If you succeed, you die. Okay? Holding your breath and resisting change have something in common. If you succeed, you die. So this is another way to put it. It's a very serious thing. Just Facebook has 2.6 billion Facebook users, active users. So it's somewhere that we need to be. Martin Luther called the organ the devil's pipes. So for him, the organ was way too modern. Today, the organ is the epitome of holy. So let me go to I see here Edgar's name. Go ahead.
Yes. Good evening, everyone.
Hi.
Yes, I enjoyed the discussion about the pastoral care ministry. Then we move on to preaching ministry. But I have not heard about evangelism ministry that is very important of the digital and virtual ministry that we're trying. Do we have a plan to do that? Are we ready to do evangelism digitally or virtually?
Excellent question. So any thoughts on this digital evangelism?
Isn't that what we're doing right now? I feel like this is evangelism, right? Whenever would we have had 13 people or 14 people on the screen all at the same time talking about best ministry opportunities? See, I think part of what the struggle is, and we're all struggling with this, is we have a picture of what evangelism looks like. Music of meditation, a sermon, an appeal, and then a baptism on the last Sabbath. What if the Lord is allowing us to plant a lot of seeds right now? Because never before would we have access like this through this medium. People weren't even thinking about it until the pandemic. And let me just say this again, the pandemic is deadly. However, I also think that the Lord has given us minds to process. If this hadn't interrupted us, most of our churches would have never had a Zoom. Our subscriptions weekly would have been maybe 10, 20 people, and the list goes on. This right here to me is evangelism, even if it doesn't fall between July 1st and July 31st. I think all of this is evangelism because we're sharing the good news, we're talking about Jesus, and we're also debunking some of the myths that are online about who the church is. I mean, how many times have we heard people say that the Adventist church is a cult? Really? If we were a cult, we would not be this free flowing with the information, understanding that this is going to be archived and listened to as often as people want to. I just think that we have to
Right.
think about it in a different kind of way.
Thank you. We're going to go to Pastor Bernardo, Pastor Bob, and Pastor Jeffy, and then we're going to go to Andrew King. But Edgar, I see you have your hand up. If you
Yes,
could.
just to clarify my evangelism evangelism group or something like that. But I'm thinking about strategic external evangelism. The bottom line is baptism, because if we just continue to be always in a local church and we just for ourselves, then we cannot have our own mandate mission of external evangelism. That is to provide avenue for people to understand our doctrine and to be part of our church. That's what I'm thinking about.
Okay, thank you.
Our church ready or our conference ready for this?
Right. So Pastor Bernardo speaking to this question, then Pastor Bob, Pastor Jeffy, and then we go to Pastor Andrew King. Go ahead.
Yeah, just sharing a testimony. I think the structure has never changed, and it is always done through the church, one-on-one evangelism, and of course, small groups. Just want to share a testimony on one of our small groups. So last year, one of our small groups was on the curriculum of Daniel and Revelation, and one of the members of that small group, and I would drive about 65 kilometers just to attend that group that meets every Tuesday night, all right? So this lady was invited into that group, and she was invited by a co-worker who works in the same nursing institution, nursing care institution. And then COVID hit. And naturally, this lady, being a co-worker and a friend, was invited via Zoom. And this lady kept on attending our weekly small group meeting, which was still done on Tuesday. But here's the thing. This lady was also invited into prayer meetings that was done on Wednesday. And because it was, the relationship was established, she was now invited into the Saturday meeting that we were having. And she was also invited into the prayer group that was also meeting on Saturday morning. So she was now able to attend more meetings than what she would have been able to attend. And then the Filipino churches, about 12 churches this November, had a joint digital evangelism for about, I was with Pastor Jess and the other Filipino pastors. And we baptized around 30 people during that joint Filipino church evangelistic series. And this lady, after 1 year of studying the Bible, I was actually worried because she jumped into that group when we were studying Daniel and Revelation, and that was, a heavy topic. And she attended midway of the course. However, after a year, she was one of those who decided to be baptized. And I believe there are many similar stories. We just have to plug in people into groups like this where relationships become the base rather than, merely just trying to convert them into faith using information.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Pastor Bob.
Okay, I'm a little triggered, so brace yourselves. We as Seventh-day Adventists have turned sheep into sloths because we have taught our people that evangelism is an event, not a way of life. And we think of evangelism as something we bring somebody in to do out there, and it's a one-time or twice-a-year deal if you've got the money for it, and then somebody else does it for us. We get in the big speaker, the best of the best, spend all the money, and then it's an event and it's over and we go back to a way of life. At Nepean, we have been teaching our people that evangelism is a way of life, and that everything we do on Sabbath is evangelism. So you shake somebody's hand, you've done evangelism. Greeting people in the parking lot is evangelism. Everything from the pew to the pulpit and the parking lot to the pulpit, everything in between is evangelism, and it happens every time you come to church. And then it happens in the way you live your life, because how you live your life is how it's your sermon that says, this is who God is, this is how God behaves, this is what God wants. You, through your own life, teach people. Your life is an evangelistic sermon that says this is who God is. And so we this idea that we're not doing evangelism, I'm with Andre, we're doing evangelism right now. Even if it's to ourselves, we're evangelizing, because evangelism is a way of life, not an event. And we have made such a huge mistake in the way we've approached evangelism in the last 50 years.
Thank you. Pastor Jeffy.
Yes. I wanted to start off with this quote briefly that says, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same results. So I think many of us in the Adventist church, I was born in the church, and I'm glad I'm still in this church. I think we should not confuse insanity with consistency. Us preaching the message of baptizing people, I think we miss the point, because I think the bottom line is discipleship, not baptism. If we evangelize people, baptism is a great thing to dip them in the water. We take pictures, we post on Facebook, but the greater work comes after dipping people in the water, because that's the day-to-day basis of their growth. And I'm glad that that question was brought forward. How are we doing with evangelism? I think we need to remodel how we do it. Back in the motherland, I know people set up tents, but you're not going to have a millionaire coming to your tent in a freezing weather in June, the winter days in June. So what are you going to do? You're going to try to minister to them at their level. You're not going to have youth coming when you're just doing the routine, but you have to be creative how you're going to evangelize. So I'm going to end with this. Matthew 28:19 says, go ye therefore. Baptize is number one. That's the beautiful thing that we love to do. But it goes on to say, and teach them everything that I've commanded you. And I think that is the added onto the evangelism that we should be doing. So there is the baptism, but the discipleship should be something that we should never forget. In the words of those who do Global Youth Day, I know Pastor Neves, you are there with my guys, Parkour at the GC. They talk about being the sermon. And I think we need to be sermon in shoes, and we need to be practical. My dad always says, don't give a hungry person Ellen White first. Give them the food. And then in the process, they are going to ask you, you don't even need to evangelize. They're going to ask you that, hey, you gave me this food. Then you have the opportunity to present the gospel. I think that's how Jesus did it. We'll be robbing ourselves of true ministry if we do it the other way around.
Thank you. Friends, I'm the moderator. I'm not supposed to interject with the questions, but, I've been triggered too. Let me tell you a story, and you will take from it what you will. I studied theology in Brazil. I'm Brazilian. And I did my master's at Newbold College. I was called by the Trans-European Division to work in England. And I married the sweetheart of my teenage years, Amy. We met at the school in England where I studied when I was a teenager. And then I went back to England to do my master's in postmodern studies and pastoral ministry. My dissertation in my master's was the Matrix film as a guide to Adventist postmodern evangelism. Okay, and they gave me a distinction, I think largely because they had no idea what I was talking about. And then I went into ministry, and I was ready. So this is, I don't know, I was 22 to something, really young at the time, and I came to a church in North London, and we ministered that year. It was epic. At the end of the year, I have this routine, this tradition of having a review of the year with my mother. And as I mentioned, she's a church planter and so on. And it was like, Mom, this year was amazing. My first year as a pastor. And she dedicated me for ministry when I was a child. So it means a lot to her that I am a pastor. And so we dreamed and we talked. That, Mom, we've had this community service and we had hundreds of people come to this event and we interacted with hundreds of people over here. And in the end, it was like this epic year. We went through the whole thing. And she was, excited for me. I was in London and she was in Brazil and we were on the phone. And then she said to me, fantastic, son, how many people gave their lives to Jesus? And my reaction was, Mom, it takes time. We're in Europe. They're secular. It's hard. 3 or 4. But son, if there are no baptisms, there is no evangelism. If people are not giving their lives to Jesus, you're not fulfilling the Great Commission, because it starts with baptism. Second year, same thing happened. The entire year, hundreds of people. This time, thousands of people interacted with the church. And we were connecting with them, and it was beautiful. At the end of that year, same conversation. It went pretty much in the same way. Mom, it takes years. And she asked me the same question again, and I answered in the same way. By the third year, I had been vaccinated from this idea that that just the first part of Christ's method is enough. All you need to do is win their trust, and then they're going to ask questions, and you never need to challenge them. Let me tell you, ministering in one of the most secular cities in the world, if you don't challenge people for baptism, they will never get baptized. The third year, I became a senior pastor. They gave me Wimbledon International Seventh-day Adventist Church, where the tennis is. A church of 160 members. International church, 56 nationalities. In the first year, I decided I was going to take the plunge and challenge people with the second part of Christ's method, which is follow me. And it was very scary to really look people in the eye, secular people especially, and challenge them for the gospel and to give their lives to Jesus. The average church in Europe baptizes 2 people a year. Okay? This year, because I took the challenge, we baptized 19 people. The second year was 16, and the average stayed between 15 and 20 for all of the years. Why? I don't know if you're a pastor, Edgar, I haven't met you, but I think you're on to something. Just the second part of the method, challenging people for baptism, does not work by itself. Neither does just the first part. And I think, and I'm pretty convinced we all agree with this, but some of us prefer one of those oars and others prefer the other. This is like a little boat. And some of us just want to minister and gain the trust of people, but we never have the courage to present it. And so we keep going round in circles, hoping that it takes years for evangelism. Others prefer the other oar. It's like, no, just challenge and prophecy on their heads, and let's just go for it. And then you keep going like this, going round in circles, and you never go anywhere either. Christ's method alone will bring true success. Why? Because you're caring for people like Jesus did, and you are challenging them to follow him like Jesus did. That's what he did with the young rich ruler. Even if he turned back and Jesus cried, he did that. So I think that we need to be careful not to lean toward one or the other, but keep those oars running together. And then we will see a harvest, 100 to 1, as Jesus said. Andrew King, I presume you're a pastor too.
Yes, I'm glad everybody's getting triggered this evening. In the area of evangelism, I agree. And I wasn't answering this question, but I will say at Downsview, we had baptisms this year. We had baptisms before the pandemic started. Boxing Day, I was in the pool doing baptisms. It's a little bit more difficult and it's a little bit more challenging. I've never done so many Bible studies on Zoom before. But I've learned a new way to reach out, to connect, to be in people's homes. And if you will continue on and be faithful and are steadfast you will have success. And like you said, you've got to challenge them. People want, especially at a time like this in a pandemic, people want to know what's going on, what's going to happen to my life. But my comment wasn't about that. I wasn't triggered, Bob, so I'm okay. I wanted to say that one thing the pandemic has brought out for me as a pastor is the way that the church looks after itself now. It's different, especially my seniors. I am so blessed with my seniors. Because people have been stuck in the homes, I have watched members shop for other members, get medication for them, call them, check on them. I mean, the church has changed. Praise God. And I pray that when we go back, we don't change.
Mm.
I don't want to go back to what we used to be before. I want to go back to this new church where we're in everybody's business, where we check on one another, where we pray for each other, where we visit each other, and they're taking care of each other. And that's how we've stayed connected as a church. The pandemic, as you said, Andre, it's a negative thing, but there are some very positive things that have happened as a result of us as a church realizing that the church is not the four walls. The church is the members inside the building. And I think God, somebody said this to me, this didn't catch God by surprise. He had to teach us something. And what he had to teach us is that we need to get out of the four walls and look after each other and stretch out our hands in the community. So it's been a blessing as well as a challenge.
Thank you, Pastor. That's very insightful there. We have here Judy Booth, who says we need to get out of the screens and walk in nature. I think she has a point that our families are struggling through this dopamine-rich environments of social media and games and even school, and everything is on screens, and we need to get out of that. How many reach out on the phone to visit with a senior or interact with lonely people or do family worship with their children? These are very interesting things. We talk about total member involvement a lot at the General Conference. This is one of Elder Wilson's main calls to action to the world is don't just depend on your pastor to do everything. You need to be involved yourself. And I think that's the dream of every pastor, right? To have their members involved. Pastor King alluded to that. Have you noticed your members, to the rest of the panelists, getting more involved than usual? Even if it is to call people on the phone to check in with them and how is this? Have you noticed a higher level of care among the laity, among the people who are providing pastoral care to each other? Allison. You're muted, Allison. Sorry.
I have seen a big jump in that with our group. Our group is basically made up of four small groups. We have two churches. We have, just to give you a bit of a geography lesson here, we got from our southernmost point is 5 hours from our northwestern point, and we have all the points in between. All together, we're about 35 members in this whole region, and we cover this whole region. And we find that we are getting together, and we have actually started, we now have two groups that are meeting on a regular basis at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning to spend between 30 minutes to to an hour just praying for the church members and everything. And then they're calling each other. They're, as they said, going out to get groceries, going to get medication for those that are relatively close to them, helping out as much as they can. And they're already going into the community to some of the businesses, telling them of some of the things that they're wanting to do. And one of my members yesterday went into Giant Tiger, and she saw the mittens and the hats that were lying there, and they knew they're going to be coming into the summer wear very shortly. So she went to the manager, any possibility I could buy all this at a reduced price? Is there any possibility? We have children that are getting on the school buses with nothing and everything. And he said, yeah, I'll give it to you 50%. Would that work? Absolutely. He said, oh, by the way, we had 2 bags of these brand new clothes and everything can your church make use of that to hand them out to these people that just don't have it? And she said, absolutely. So they're going to start up a Dorcas in that part of the area. So they're already working, and they're doing more of it than what they ever did before.
Excellent. Who else would like to comment at this point? We've run through the text, and we're now trying to land the plane. We've got 15 minutes to land this plane and get some conclusions here. So Pastor Jeffy, and then I want to go back to Pastor Edgar.
Yeah, I think I've seen and witnessed a lot of positive change with people being willing to be more involved. I think some people really have had that experience that Isaiah had when he says, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord. So in the year that Corona happened, some people really discovered that they need the Lord. Whereas some people who were in the Lord have grown to higher heights with the Lord, and some we have lost because that's the reality of the brutality of this season that we're in. But I think one of the main things that has helped us to get to a point where more members get involved is to be intentional. Back in the days, people could give you an excuse, oh, I don't have a dress to come up to the pulpit, I don't have a suit and tie. These days, you can even rock it like me, man. You don't need a tie, you just come in there. The Lord says, come and share the word as you are. So I think the biggest thing is to allow people to be themselves and show them that they have a unique perspective to bring to the table. So I wanted to highlight this, that as pastors, we need to discover potential, because you're always going to have members from day one who are fighting you for the mic, as if they're even, since I've been young in ministry, I ask some people, are you being paid to make announcements? Because the way you're fighting to go there and make announcements, I'm surprised. Well, you could just allow some people to take that opportunity. So I think it is our prerogative to discover the potential of some other members, and it will even ease the pressure on some of our elders and deacons not to burn out by having more people in the mix. And if it means there are some people who are technologically disadvantaged, go to their house, record them. There's no excuse in this day and time. But I think I've seen a positive outlook as people are being more willing to be involved.
Yes, we have a Facebook question here, which is an allusion to the incredible Seventh-day Adventists who have worked in healthcare facilities, either hospitals or nursing homes and others, where you are going to work every day with a high chance that you will catch COVID, and you might be one of those statistics where you don't want to be, and your family doesn't want you to be. And there is a level of heroism to put others first as you care for them. And we are very thankful to all the Seventh-day Adventists. Some of them are our families who have given their time and have risked for the sake of others. It doesn't get more close to the life of Jesus than that. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to go to Pastor Edgar and then Pastor Andrew King, and then we go for final thoughts and comments from our panelists. So start thinking of something you would like to say to end it. Pastor Edgar first.
Yeah, I'm a laity person. I'm just a laity, a single elder of the church. I was studying in IAS for my masteral in church administration. And I'd like to share with you what happened there last year. They have this digital evangelism for 40 days.
I think the internet cut out. We lost you, Edgar. Let's see if he comes back. Pastor Andrew King, go ahead.
Yeah, we had been doing a lot of online streaming before the pandemic hit, and there's one thing I would like to challenge us as pastors about. There's a lot of analytics that you can get from YouTube and from Facebook, and what the analytics, and they're free, and what they will allow you to do as a pastor to see who's watching, frequency. We're talking about evangelism. We need to up the game a little bit more when it comes to this idea of reaching out to the community. You would be amazed at who's watching you, who's tuning in. And through the analytics, you may be able then to gear your programming or to reach needs and connect with these people. And as everyone has said, those who are being triggered, it is a long-term process. It doesn't happen overnight. But this medium provides us with great opportunities to reach out to the people. And they don't have to come to the church. I think I'll say this right now. There are some members who may never come to our church, but yet may join the Seventh-day Adventist church.
We have many of those. Every day I get pictures of baptisms that only happen because people connected with the church digitally from all over the world. It's a beautiful thing. Edgar, are you back? Do you want to finish your point?
Yeah, that's just giving you a share that is not impossible here in North America or even in Europe. Digital evangelism is now the normal thing for Seventh-day Adventists because we are a global church.
Yes.
So we need to study that not only in local church, but our conference or union or a division, a holistic strategic evangelism digitally, because that is the way we could use all the digital, according to Sam Neves, he's the expert on digital evangelism. We can use them, what is the planning to do, because that's the way we go, probably.
Excellent, Edgar. I'm responsible for digital evangelism globally for the Adventist Church. So I have a lot to say about this. And if you're interested in this, you can go to find the GAIN channel on YouTube. If you go to GAIN, GAIN.adventist.org, this is a great website that will resource you and will teach you exactly how to do these things that were mentioned here. Let's go for our final thoughts and comments as we try to land the plane. Pastor Andre, I want to start with you.
All right. Wow, what an incredible conversation. I can't wait until next week. I think we do this again there. But here's what I do want to say, and I don't know if this is going to land the plane or put it back in the air, is that what we now know, since many of us were caught off guard, is that we have to become better planners. One of the things that I don't necessarily love about this pandemic is that we scrambled for the first couple of months, whether with our technology, what our services were going to look like, and the list goes on and on. One of the things I do appreciate about my church, and again, this is not about Shiloh, but this is best ministry practices that we're sharing here, is we already had a mission, vision, and core values that were driving our ministry even before the pandemic. And so all we had to do was adjust our mission and vision to suit the times. But we're not following behind the pandemic. We're leading in front of the pandemic. And that is important, because how will you know if you're ministering effectively if you don't have a plan? And I think that this is one of the things that we will have to wrestle with organizationally, that we don't want to be individuals who are constantly adjusting to suit what's happening, but we have a plan and we're able to tweak it. There will always be nuances, but we have a plan. And that's what I would like to say until we meet again next week to talk a little bit more about this.
Thank you. Excellent. Allison, let me come to you.
I think the one word I would put forward is adaptability. We need to be willing to be adaptable in all situations. Otherwise, we will be caught fumbling the ball, or some might say caught with our pants down, scrambling. As Pastor Andre said, that we have our basic plans in place. But just because one thing seems to be working at this point in time, we need to be forward-looking to say, okay, we need to start tweaking it now. As the virus is already tweaking itself and becoming variant, we got to become variant as well, so that we are more adaptable and penetrate even more.
Thank you. Pastor Bob.
I think if we've learned anything, is that COVID might have closed our doors, but it didn't stop the church. It didn't.
That's right.
We had a mission, we had a vision, and we had a plan. We just had to learn how to adapt. And once we learned how to swim with the current, ministry continued. And next week, we can talk about this. Some incredible ministry opportunities showed themselves because God wasn't caught off guard. God was not. And I think that my job as a minister is to still stay in touch with God, who sees it all, who knows what's going to happen in 2021, and not forget that God has got us through this whole thing. And I think during COVID, I lost a little sense of that. I was overwhelmed, got a little burnt out, I lost a little focus. And then I, came to this realization that God is still over me, over his church, and just ask God what he wants us to do with this at this time. And maybe we're being called to a greater dependence on him than we ever were before. Not our technology or our programs, but on him.
Pastor Jeffy.
I want to drop the mic here with an acronym, CRA, not Canada Revenue Agency. I know a lot of people are waiting for taxes, but I want to say CRA, change, resilience, and assurance. For those who want to change, I say if you're afraid to step up your game, I say, remember, you're not growing young. So start today or die regretting. For those who might feel like they're down and they're out in ministry or in whatever circumstance, I say resilience. If this pandemic has ravaged your soul and you feel like withdrawing from 2021, I heard some people saying, I'm done with the 2021 trial version. I say to you, you may remain hopeless, but don't remain godless. For those who are in ministry, the final acronym here, which is A, is assurance. Some of the things you're going to try and initiate, maybe you're a young pastor, a young deacon, or a young fellow youth in the church, you're trying to do your thing. And people are saying, why are you wearing short pants? Why are you not wearing a tie? And many other things that you're trying to initiate during this season. I say to you, I'm assuring you that there are people who support you as long as you dance to their tune. But God will root for you even when the music is off. CRA, change, resilience, assurance. I'm out.
Thank you. Let me go to Pastor Neftali, please.
I like to say that COVID-19 has changed people, changed their lives, and physically and emotionally, and our society is changed. Church is changed. As I said before, church dynamic will never be the same. And the same way also ministry will never be the same. Evangelism will never be the same, as we said before. So as we are navigating in this situation right now, we need to begin to think and plan, as Pastor Andrew said, plan for post-COVID and use some of the things that we are using right now that COVID caused us to use, and the good thing that we are doing to continue to do them even after COVID, like the members' involvement in ministry and time management in ministry. Those are the things ministers and also church members need to keep with them so that we can continue to be effective in ministry as we prepare a people for God's coming.
Amen. Pastor Jesse, we started with you, and I think you're the last of our panelists, and I would like to hear your thoughts before we close tonight with a prayer.
Thank you. I've heard the word adapt, and I'd like to use this word again. We must adapt quickly to the rapid changes that are happening in the world. And by adapting, I mean to the new norm of doing church and ministry. We cannot live in the past. We have to be proactive in embracing what is upon us and maximizing the use of the resources that are at our disposal to conduct our ministry. And I also recognize the need for holistic small groups more than ever. Pastors can't do it all. We need our leaders to join the pastor in the work of pastoral care, especially in larger churches. We need our elders, we need our deacons, so that we could address the needs, especially of those who are isolated. Our seniors, they are lonely, and they need us to be there for them.
Thank you. What a way to end. I want to read a comment from JL Snag on YouTube. She says, "This is such an amazing opportunity for members to connect with the conference. This would not have been possible had we not been forced to lock down and find other ways to connect. Enjoyed," she says. If you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook, either live or at another time, we would like to pray for you, whether you are a pastor, a local church leader, a member, or even if you have nothing to do with church. This has been a difficult time for all of us, to some of us more difficult than to others. And we know that God has never left our side, even at the times that we did not feel his presence there. So I want to invite you, pastors, and others that are watching, to close your eyes and pray with me as we end today's meeting. Dear Heavenly Father, we have been talking about ministering in crisis. Lord, it dawns on us that when you saw the world in crisis, after we rebelled against you, you did not give up on us, but you ministered to us through your Son, Jesus Christ. You entered our putrid situation, and you lived through helping us to understand who you are and how much you love us. And you are rescuing us from all of our mess. We know, Lord, that things will get worse before they get better. We know the promise of your Son Jesus that in this world we'll have affliction. And Lord, we pray for the presence of the Holy Spirit to comfort our hearts through the crisis. Lord, we also see the opportunities prophetically that you have laid out for us, the opportunities to proclaim, the opportunities to preach, the opportunities to minister to people's needs, the opportunities of healing for ourselves and for them. Lord, we would love for our family members and our loved ones and our neighbors and our colleagues and even the strangers that live in our communities to be reconciled to each other and to you. And so we surrender all of the families that are listening to this broadcast, whether they're pastors or elders or leaders or church members, or even those that have not connected with the church yet. We surrender them into your loving hands, that you may take care of us as we think through all of the insights that have been shared tonight. As we wait for the next meeting in a week's time, give us more insights that we can share and also questions to ask. We ask this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Christelle, I want to thank you for the opportunity of being part of this program. Thank you for the invitation and for organizing it so well. I pass it back to you.
Yeah, so thank you very much. I've thoroughly enjoyed the insights shared by all of the panelists and by our moderator, Pastor Neves. I just wanted to recap some things that stood out to me. Have a plan, adapt. There were two statements, adapt or be extinct, change or die. So think about that, adapt or be extinct, change or die. Those are very serious. And then CRA, which is not Canada Revenue Agency, it's change, resilience, and assurance. So I just want to leave you with that. And there's a lot more to look forward to next week. So join us at the same place and same time. Those of you who are in ministry, we're inviting our pastors, our elders, Bible workers, and church communicators to actually register so that they can be part of the extended panel. And the rest of you, you can join us again on Facebook and YouTube. We're excited to just continue the discussion on how God has used this time, even though it's been very difficult, as an opportunity to reach even more people than before. So thank you all for coming, and thank you those of you who shared your insights today.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.
Bye. God bless.